I want to continue with the theme of my video, why the men's rights movement will not succeed. Something that hadn't occurred to me while making the video, is that some people can't be MGTOW. Obviously a woman can't be MGTOW, nor can married men. So if they want to help men, then what banner do they do this under, what word, what label do they use, to describe their political position? The problem with the men's rights movement is that it welcomes anyone who for any reason has a hair up their ass over feminism. Maybe a person is anti-feminist because feminism hurts men. Maybe they are anti-feminism because feminism is a small part of statism, and they're just anti-statists. Maybe they are against feminism because they feel threatened by women having jobs, it makes their dick limp, and so down with feminism. Maybe they don't like feminism because they believe the way to best maximize women's prosperity is to have them in the home, safe and sound, being protected and supported by their disposable manservant called husband. Maybe they are against feminism because the Bible says blah blah blah. Maybe they are against feminism because they believe feminism is a Jewish invention to lower the white population. Maybe they are against feminism because Illuminati, or space aliens. Maybe they are against feminism because any movement beginning with the letter F is a bad movement. So many reasons why an individual may gripe about feminism, and all of these individuals get to proudly call themselves men's rights activists. Not that the bulk of them give a shit about men, but that title sounds good, feels good. It's a politically correct title to operate under while bashing feminism. As was discussed in that video, the blame it all on feminism mentality is detrimental. The man hollering about losing his kids in a divorce, he blames it on feminism, when he needs to blame it first and foremost on traditionalism. Traditionalism asserts kids belong with the mother, and women are to be stay-at-home parents dependent on a man's money, and a man's role is to be a cash dispenser. Not only is this in the tradcan philosophy, but the situation itself leads to this outcome: a man does all the work, pays all the bills, the woman stays home with the kids. When they divorce, who do you think is going to get the kids, and who do you think is going to help pay the bills? So this is a great example of scapegoating feminism and why doing so backfires on men. But another problem with blaming it all on feminism, is that it ignores so many things that fuck men over, which are not always the result of feminism. And of course there is the difficulty these people have describing feminism in any precise and meaningful way. They have turned their fight against feminism into an obsessive religion. Feminism is Satanism, and they are soldiers for God fighting the devil. This is the mentality of many of them. The point I am trying to make here is that far too many, the majority, of MRAs don't give a shit about men, and won't hesitate to throw men under the bus in their fight against feminism. Look how many MRAs want to call people like me and Barbarossa misogynists. If you want to go fight misogyny, join the fucking feminist movement. A men's movement should be all about fighting misandry. Look how many of these MRAs think they're being clever when they make references to some MGTOW are only that way because girls reject them. These people are still supporting the notion that women's approval determines the value of a man. These people need to be driving it home hard, that a woman's approval means nothing whatsoever. But the truth of the matter is, most of these MRAs seek women's approval, want to protect and white knight for women, and ultimately don't care about men. In an upcoming video, I will be showing two MRAs who come out of the closet and confess they don't give a shit about the rights or well-being of men. They just use men's rights as an excuse to bash feminism, and the reason they hate feminism is convoluted at best, but that'll have to wait for the video. Since my appearance on YouTube, as Razorblade Candy, I've operated under the banner of MRA, and then probably only a year now, operated under the title of both MRA and MGTOW. It has gotten to the point where I can't rightfully call myself an MRA, when MRAs in this day and age are nothing but misandrists, white knights, worshipping the golden uterus. These men are pawns for women. Like I said, AVFM has become a voice for housewives and the glorification of women's God-given role as housewife. The men's rights movement, in its Moby Dick-style hunt for feminism, has thrown away every virtue, every principle, every standard, and has welcomed with open arms every mental defect, male and female. There is only one rule in that movement: gripe about feminism. It has become saturated with insecure, old-fashioned, mentally defective freaks who can't function in any real movement, therefore find themselves in the intellectual sewers of the men's rights movement. It is a shame that such a meaningful and needed title like men's rights has been hijacked by freaks and defects of every kind. Actually, it didn't get saturated. What happens, and this is really sad, is that the freaks and retards have always been there. I remember these fuck-ups from way back in the early to mid-2000s. What happened is all the more intelligent men just started identifying as MGTOW, even in the Google trend that shows the increasing interest in MGTOW, and then the sudden massive spike in MGTOW. Simultaneously we see a lowering of the popularity of men's rights, plain and simple. The people in the MRM who weren't fucking retarded enough to think protecting and providing for women was a part of being a real man, and retarded enough to think marriage was an okay thing for men in this climate. Men who weren't this retarded began operating under the banner of MGTOW. Certainly this is my story of switching labels, and it probably applies to a lot of people. So the people you have left over in the MRM are the old-fashioned types. The mental defects, the Alex Joneses, the right-wing extremists who can't get laid and blame this on feminism. And then came the exploitative female types, to rein the men back in and rope them back onto the plantation, so to speak. These women who feed these insecure men cookies and self-esteem strokes for being good little protectors and providers. These women starting this nonsense that MGTOW is just men making their own choices, like getting married and providing for their family like a good loving man. And these women say this shit because they won't come right out and blast MGTOW, because that might tip off the fragile egoed males under their spell. I mean, come on. If not even one man in this movement said marriage was anything less than a trap, this movement would have 2, maybe 3, females in it. This is just the exploitative manipulative housewife wannabes reining in the men and socializing them into their role of protector and provider, useful disposable tool for women, and these men under their spell, getting their ego stroked. Being reminded not all women are like that, you just have to keep looking and weed out those nasty feminists, these gullible males having their neediness soothed, and getting socialized. Look how quick these fuckers turn around like pawns for these women and accuse us MGTOW of being misogynists. How these little gullible dipshits have ever called another man a white knight, and are now incapable of looking in the mirror, and realizing they are now white knighting. How they can do this without spotting the hypocrisy, is mind-boggling. But hey, when logic and feelings collide, feelings win out. And these men are riding high on the promise that if they just cry loud enough about what rotten whores feminists are, women will knock it off, and then women will love them, and they can live happily ever after, and all their teenage masturbation fantasies of having an obedient, loving, subservient housewife will come true. These lonely and insecure men, so easily manipulated, and the rest of the men in the MRM that don't fit this profile, they're just some grouchy libertarians and conservatives whose main objective is to fight socialism and remind us to just vote right-wing, because God knows if we can just vote for better Republicans, that'll fix everything. Well, it's been the right-winger's mantra for centuries now. I say freaking mental defect, but that obviously doesn't apply to all of the MRMans, not even all of the tradcans, just too damn many of them. Obviously not every tradcan is necessarily mentally defective, but there is this phenomenon, I don't know what it's called. Back in the atheist community we spoke from time to time about how on one end of the spectrum there is your average Joe Christian type. There's nothing wrong with him internally or externally, he just believes what he was raised to believe. Then you get the deeply religiously devoted. There's often a little something wrong with these people, not all of them, but there is a rather high prevalence of them having issues. But due to our atheist bias, we couldn't trust our judgment to say for sure. Then came the religious extremists, those dancing around with poisonous snakes for Jesus, those rolling around on the floor talking in tongues, and stuff like that. On the extreme end, they looked and acted crazy. The unfortunate problem is, a lot of them, actually were mentally ill. There was no shortage of reports of weird religious parents doing fucked up shit to their kids, normally resulting in the children's death. There were deeply religious people committing shootings, and other acts of destruction, guided by the hand of God. And you realize, in spite of all the casual Joes that made up their majority of mainstream religion, religion itself acted as a mask for insanity. It was difficult to tell the difference between a religious extremist and a schizophrenic. When the religious extremist keeps talking about hearing the voice of God, acting on the will of God, and then some schizo is hearing the voice of God, and eventually drown some child in a bathtub or lake, to carry out the will of God, you realize that the extreme end of religion and genuine mental disorder overlap way too much. And so the saying was religion masks mental illness. In a church of people talking in tongues, rolling on the floor, and having exorcisms performed, you spot the religious-inspired person, and spot the schizophrenic. In that environment, you can't tell which is which. This isn't just religion though, this rule applies to any type of extremism, more or less. The men's movement, from its very inception, was made up of the right-wing extreme, not the casual right, not the guy who's a Republican because fuck Obamacare. I'm not talking your average conservative or average libertarian, I'm talking the extreme end that starts morphing into Alex Jones territory and Jewish banking conspiracy territory. This extreme end, like a church with people talking in tongues, may be way out there, but the people themselves not necessarily ill. But then comes the people who are a little mentally unhinged. They get camouflaged in the right-wing extremism environment, And this isn't a knock on the right, we have seen firsthand the fucking wackadoos that exist on the far end of the left. The social justice warriors, for example, we have seen no shortage of laughable weirdness from them, and in the LGBT, I have seen things like this biological female identifying as a male, but get this, it's only attracted to gay men, and is throwing a fit about intolerance that no gay men find her attractive. Well, no gay man can find her attractive because she has a female body, she has the wrong equipment, it's just fucking weird. Like, if she identified as male, she'd be seeking women, but no. She identifies as a gay male. Wrap your fucking head around that, and what's more, a straight male is not what she is looking for. Because his heterosexuality means he is attracted to her female biology which she rejects, so she needs a gay man. Jiminy crickets, this is silly, and to see so much support for this shit, and belly aching about intolerance and gender fluidity and all that LGBTNOP craziness, there comes a point where my ability to accept those with a different sexuality gets strained and I just can't reach the appropriate level of tolerance, and just have to call it like it is, fucking mental illness. The person just has mental problems, in the same way that the LGBT has a lot of mentally ill people, and in that environment, it's hard to pick out the normal gays from the completely messed up wackadoos. The extreme right has its share, and most of these people fall into the men's rights movement, and they have been accepted and tolerated and overlooked, and they have been overlooked because everyone had this belief that men have one enemy and one enemy only, feminists. So, no matter how much of a completely obvious whack job you are, so long as you're griping about feminists, you get a free pass, and so long as 5,000 people gripe about feminists, and do nothing but gripe about feminists, everything looks hunky-dory. It's when you get these people to open their mouth and talk about anything besides feminism, you start to see the frayed ends of their sanity, you start to see they might be a little off in the head. Now again, these people are not the entirety of the MRM, but goddamn there are a lot of them, and then you have the people in the MRM who take their traditionalism, and their conservatism, and basically turn it into a religion. The extremists, and the nuts, they start becoming indistinguishable. I would like to catalogue all the nuts, but I can't. The good old Archie Bunker, and the guy with the sexual hang-ups, overlap too much. The guy who says a woman's place is at home raising her kids, because it works, and the guy saying a woman's place is at home, because these are pity women need a big masculine dick to smack them into submission. These two people are very different, yet both end up saying a woman's place is in the home. Now, this does not mean there aren't freaks and weirdos in MGTOW, because there most certainly are, and oddly, easy to spot for some reason. In fact, there are a few self-proclaimed MGTOW who are just total whack jobs. They're right up though with the right-wing extremist traditionalist who needs to beat an uppity feminist into housewife subservience with his cock. Again, I am not trying to claim the entire MRM is like this, but hear me out. A feminist by the name of Extremely Boring, maybe some of you remember her, I pwned her a few times, had this video that she's taken down, but it was called the most misogynist thing I ever seen. It was about a Tumblr page this guy made filled with degrading porn. It had pictures and gifs of women being walked around on a leash, having their faces pissed on, having their faces slapped with cocks, eating dog food, and other degrading and humiliating things. What made it really interesting is all the captions and paragraphs of pseudo-MRA ideology. I say pseudo, because it bordered on actually being MRA material, and by that, I mean extreme anti-feminism. For example, the paragraph might read something like these feminists claim they want independence, but this is a lie. A woman's natural role is to be submissive and obedient, but some Jew cunts sold them a lie that they were people. A woman's place is on her knees scrubbing floors. A woman's place is on her knees pleasing her husband. And the thing is, these women know this. They long for a strong man to put them in their place. They're all God determined for them. When a feminist opens her mouth, it is a desperate cry for cock. There is a solution to the feminist problem. When a feminist opens her mouth, feed her some sausage. This is what a woman's mouth is for. Followed by gifs of women having huge cocks rammed in her mouth. It was paragraph after paragraph, and caption after caption, of this kind of rhetoric, sandwiched between degrading porn images, and of course, no shortage of references and images and videos of women fixing sandwiches, having their asses slapped while doing women's work in the kitchen, and other fetishizing of housewives. It completely demonized feminism for asserting women are people and can work like a man. It worshipped, and downright fetishized women in the kitchen, sweeping floors, and other common housewife tasks. It repeated over and over, a feminist is just a woman that doesn't know she isn't people, a cock in her mouth, a cock in her ass, a cock in her cunt, will fuck the feminist right out of them, and return them to their natural subservient role. serving men sandwiches, and this stuff wasn't one picture or one post, it was a freaking huge blog. I explained to the feminist, extremely boring, that this guy was not an MRA, this was either a parody or fetish porn of some sort, and that's that. She claimed this is what the entire MRM looked like to her. Anyhow, now that I look back at things, and have time to reflect, and to do so from a different perspective, I see extremely boring's point. For my die-hard fans who've seen all my videos, I'm sure you'll recall me going back over memory lane about my involvement in the early anti-feminist community online, around 2003 or 2005 and ending in 2008. Anyhow, I mentioned that the movement was such a disheveled mess. There was no direction. Everything could be split into three categories. 1. Fathers' rights, typically run by divorce-specializing law firms, asking for money. 2. Strong Christian conservatism with an extra heap of Bible thump, and a touch of white nationalism. 3. Straight-up misogyny for the sake of chuckles. There were no shortage of blogs and blog posts that fought feminism, but mostly from the perspective that a woman's place is in the home. These blogs started all the wonky MRA mythologies that is still being circulated. Myths such as, 1. More women attending college is what caused tuition to skyrocket. No, it really hasn't. And the actual explanation is, in a nutshell, government subsidized, then cut funding, and that cut gets rolled over to the student's cost. Yeah, 9 times out of 10 the best bet is to let the free market determine a price, and this is a great example. 2. More women entering the workforce cut the wage in half. This is false, as I showed in my Bloomfield trial video when she tried this shit. The bulk of the wage depreciation is outsourcing, though it is not the only reason, but women entering the workforce is not a part of it. 3. Women working just got the family taxed twice. Also in the Bloomfield trial video I dispelled this myth. 4. Women working is a Marxist conspiracy to weaken the family, another myth I debunked in the Bloomfield trial video. 5. Women working is a corporate conspiracy to generate more subservient cheap wage workers. 6. Women working hurts corporations. Gee, I thought it was a corporate conspiracy, now it hurts corporations. And the list of mythologies of why women working causes every problem known to man, many of them repeated by Janet Bloomfield and debunked in my Bloomfield on trial videos. Anyhow, the misogyny for the sake of misogyny, often rooted in women shouldn't work, they're too stupid to work, they fuck everything up. Every problem in the world is the result of these dumb fucktoys thinking they're people and wanting jobs like people. Bitches need to be in the kitchen, having babies, making sandwiches, and swallowing cum is all they can do. This was such a powerful theme, non-stop bashing women. It would take a long time for me to notice that the pattern wasn't just hatred of women, it was hatred of women walking away from their role as stay-at-home mothers. It was like Janet Bloomfield's earlier blog posts, but with more raunch and more references to cocks shoved in them. The old anti-feminist community was absolutely saturated with this shit. That and the Bible thumping, and small size of the communities, is why I could never really be active. I just felt it to be ultimately unproductive, and everyone goddamn it acted like mental fuck-ups. It's like these people wore mental dysfunction on their sleeves, except for pickup artists, and some of the fathers' rights community. Then came a new wave of anti-feminists like Fred X and his crew, and they became superstars, and then mysteriously disappeared. I kid you not, they just vanished under really weird circumstances around 2008. Anyhow, my fans will note that I have gone down this memory lane several times, and talked about these problems with the earlier community. The thing I want to point out, is like that Tumblr blog talking about every feminist needs a cock in her mouth to make her into a good sandwich-making housewife. The early anti-feminist community had a lot of that, only watered down. Still, today, we can still see this weird tendency. I am reminded of HT Arcade, who now goes by Rickigulara. I want you to think about some of his videos where he would show a woman bringing her man a sandwich and bringing him his video game controller, and other subservient housewifey things. Think of all the porn that dude posts on Facebook, and sometimes the porn geared towards woman's role as subservient fucktoy, and now think of a lot of the arguments you see today about how a woman just needs a strong masculine male to tell her no, and put her in her place, and how women naturally want to submit to a strong alpha male, you know, the sort of shit Academy says. And think about all the posts about how women are too stupid to work, too useless to do anything but pop out kids and make sandwiches. I'm telling you, all this shit runs together, and is ultimately a watered-down version of that hardcore humiliation fetish porn blog Extremely Boring pointed out. All these weird excuses to keep women in the house barefoot and pregnant, parasitically leeching off her man. Most of these arguments can be found on Bloomfield's blog. But if you've watched those videos, you'll remember just how many different excuses she came up with that women belonged in the home. Aside from it causes more pollution when they work, I don't think any of these ideas were original. These ideas have been running rampant in the anti-feminist, or MRM, community since forever. It is my belief, the majority of the MRM is attacking feminism, primarily because women are leaving the home and working, which isn't even that much the fault of feminism, to be honest. The men's rights movement is not a movement geared towards securing equal rights and treatment for men. It is, and largely always has been, a movement ultimately about keeping women in the home as stay-at-home mothers, and it has come up with every zany pretense imaginable. The core of it is sexual dysfunction in men. That's right, the bulk of the MRM by this point are made up of tradcans, and a hardy portion of the tradcans are sexually dysfunctional men who for whatever reason are fetishizing the housewife. There are good people in the MRM, they are rare. There are a lot of tradcans in the MRM, not all of them messed up or bad. There is unfortunately a large minority of sexually dysfunctional tradcans. Differentiating conservative and libertarian extremist MRA from the sexually dysfunctional MRA is a difficult task, like spotting the clinically diagnosed schizophrenic at a holy rolling church where they're talking in tongues and rolling around possessed by the Holy Spirit, or proclaim to. Differentiating them is difficult. To make it worse, on Tumblr and the blogosphere, they are retumbling, retweeting, copy and pasting each other's arguments until their philosophies and arguments morph into one ball of dysfunction. To put it simply, the messed up, toxic, sexually deviants, are projecting so much of their toxicity into the intellectual arena that it is seeping into the mind of the right-wing extremists. It's all morphing together, creating a cauldron of toxicity, making the overall movement a bunch of toxic, dysfunctional, regressive, reactionary freaks. I believe the level of toxicity is growing. The ram a cock in them to make them good housewives type of toxicity is contagious, and we are seeing a forever more dysfunctional tradcan, and maybe I am wrong about that, but it's just that I keep seeing the same bizarre fear-driven reactionary masculinist disgruntled PUA type mythologies circulating, and like I said, I think many former MRAs are now identifying as MGTOW, and so what you have left over is the regressives, the extremists, and the all-around dysfunctionals. Like a purification process has taken place. Those wackadoos I mentioned from many years ago, they never went away, they're still here, and many of the good MRAs now identify as MGTOW, and so there are only two types of MRA left, the toxic or the regressive, and the people who can't march under the MGTOW banner because they are female or married. I suppose there are still some good ones who just don't get it yet, but all of those good MRAs, they are the minority, and they are in an intellectually toxic pool. I don't want to bash the MRA label, but it is a label that has been mostly hijacked by toxic people. Dear MRAs, it's the 85% making you good 15% look bad, and this all happened for one reason: not enough people really give a shit about men, and therefore the only common ground anyone had for that movement was bashing feminism. This is how toxic and dysfunctional people tag-teamed with regressive reactionaries to make up the bulk of a movement that should have had nothing to do with either one if the equal rights and equal treatment of men, as the label implies, actually meant anything to them. The crash, the fall, of the MRM into a cesspool of toxic dysfunction, is the direct result of not actually caring about men, but just finding camaraderie in hating feminists. In my next video, I am going to show you a modern-day example of the type of nonsense that made up practically every anti-feminist blog back in the pre-YouTube era, and armed with the descriptors I gave you in this video, it will become painfully obvious that his gripe with feminism is directly related to his dick, his sexual hang-ups and sexual insecurities. And once I have exposed a few blog posts by this guy, you'll become so familiar with the arguments, and especially the language, that you will start seeing this rhetoric everywhere in the MRM. You'll really see it. It is my hope, at least, that you will remember the example of that Tumblr blog that described. It's only a shame I can't actually show you the blog. You will remember that hardcore humiliation, that beat a feminist down with your cock to make her a good little housewife, that ultra-misogyny extremely boring freaked out about. You'll hear and read the arguments and familiarize yourself with the language of this guy's blog, and suddenly you will spot this shit all throughout the present MRM. And then, I will show you a video of a couple of MRAs who come out of the closet that they only fight feminism, and don't give a flying fuck about men's rights, followed by their motives. It is my hopes after those two videos, the points I make in this video will become more clear, more real, more self-evident. And I also want to say, you may have noticed I talk about the old school misogyny. And theoretically, doesn't that conflict with the notion that these people are white knights? Well, here's the thing, they worship women like goddesses, but it is an ultra-specific love and worship. It is in fact very conditional, The condition is this: a woman is born into this world, as valuable as all the diamonds in the world. One baby girl has the value of pretty much the entire male sex put together. Her value can only be rivaled by another baby girl. This baby girl, as she grows and matures, must remain a virgin, covered, and shy. She must always be shy, bashful, and respectful. She must exist in a perpetual state of helplessness, submission, femininity. She must be selected by a man, as if she were a piece of fruit plucked from a tree, and to this man she must be wedded, bound by law and in the eyes of God. To this one man, the only man she will ever know, she must then give absolute obedience and submission to her husband, and she must give him children. She must stay locked in the house like a jewel in a jewelry box, always helpless, always subservient, always reliant on her husband. If she can be a virgin, wedded to a man, and eternally locked in the house and subservient, she is a goddess. This, you see, is the natural state of woman. This is how women are. It is written in their DNA by evolution or by the hand of God. This is how every female is: pristine, innocent virgin, destined to be a subservient housewife. This precious plucked fruit, the greatest male prized possession, locked in a safe jewelry box called a house, forever. This is the way it has always been, the way it is, and the way it shall always be. It is nature, and the will of God. Any deviation from this, is an act of Satan. It is the fault of Karl Marx. It is the fault of the commies. It is the fault of feminism. It is the fault of Satan. A woman is innocent, beautiful, submissive, obedient, destined to be the property of man. But, as did the serpent so tempt Eve, the mother of woman, away from God and husband, so too does feminism tempt woman from man and God. Women are worshipped, and protected, bestowed upon them automatic value. This worship, this love, is conditional that she never stray from this male fantasy. Any straying, any giving into the temptation from the feminist serpent, shall render her a violated whore, an abomination of woman. Thus all men must unite to shelter women from the tempting feminist serpent, lest our goddesses leave their jewelry box and become a satanic feminist whore. You see, when us MGTOW who have awakened from the matrix, blame the nature of woman for bad female behavior, we are committing blasphemy, and totally ruining the male fantasy of the blue pill man. The blue pill man must believe. He absolutely must believe in the great virtue of the virgin female, and her destiny to be locked away, obedient to him. This is woman's nature. It must be. His sexuality demands it to be so. To break the illusion, to in any way remind him that this male libido-driven view of the default nature of woman is an illusion, shatters his sense of self. Since his self is centered on the fulfillment of the male sexual fantasy, this is the man in the matrix. He is too far gone. He is the chaser of the illusion of woman. The myth of woman. To shatter his illusion, is to shatter himself. His ego defenses kick in, and rejects the truth, as a sour stomach would expel a toxin. To the chronic blue pill man, the red pill is a toxin that will not be digested. Sorry for the poetic language. Anyway, my next two videos will be giving examples of the subconscious sexual fetishizing of the domesticated housewife, and how this is the underlying theme in the traditionalist hijacked MRM, and then demonstrate a couple of MRAs confessing that actual love and concern for the well-being of men is not their motive. And I will be demonstrating how toxic this is to us, and I will be tying it together, the toxicity of the sexual dysfunction, and the toxicity of the apathetic anti-feminist, and how this has undermined the MRM, rendering it a self-crippled train wreck, and why continuing to operate as an MRA is self-defeating. But for those good MRAs that are still out there, I don't know what to do for you. It's a shame you can't flush out the toxic people. You are the 15 to 20%, they are the 80 to 85%. Also, you can spot a blue pill man simply by his statement that feminism is the enemy. The failure of the MRM is the Captain Ahab-like obsession with feminism, the right-wing extremism, and lack of any genuine concern for men. It's always been about pushing some right-wing bullshit, and fighting feminism. It's always been about the sexual dysfunction of mental defects. It's never been about caring about men. I declare all men who do not care about men, to be enemies of men, and hope to make a case great enough to convince the rest of you of this.